A wonderful greetings and hello to everybody, and hope you are doing wonderful today on this Sunday. Hope you have reached or well on your way to reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual health. And we especially want to wish everyone a very happy Pan-African Women's Day. July 31st is the official day designated for Pan-African Women's Day. And, a couple of weeks ago, we did a program here honoring Pan-African Women's Day, and we have a number of programs within the All African People's Revolutionary Party that we're sponsoring in the next couple of weeks, and we will certainly give you more information about those programs at the end of this hour. Pan-African Women's Day is a critically important institution in building our revolutionary Pan-Africanist work, so we certainly encourage you to commemorate it and to pay attention. Today, of course, we're focused on commemorating Black August, what that means, and talking about our fallen soldiers who had the courage to stand up for us and to risk their lives in doing so, and what their sacrifice means for our movement today and going forward. So we start, as we always do, by honoring the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere. And since we're approaching August, and every year that makes me think about Black August, I, of course, have been thinking a lot about Leonard Peltier, the indigenous activist from the American Indian movement who has been in prison for going on 45 years for a crime he did not commit, that he was framed by the Federal Bureau of Investigation. They know he didn't commit the crime. He didn't kill those 2 FBI agents at the Jumping Bull compound in 1975. They know he didn't do it. The people who did do it have acknowledged that and confessed to that years ago. And there's overwhelming evidence to support that they are telling the truth. But they were going after Leonard Peltier because of his involvement in the struggle for indigenous rights in this backward country. So we think of him and we wish him well and send him positive spirits, and all of the indigenous people fighting for their just rights for this land. We wish them well, and we stand in complete solidarity with them. And also, of course, we continue to give acknowledgement to our African ancestors who are here with us in spirit and who are the only reason why we are here. We would not be here were it not for them. And so when you see someone wearing a shirt that says something like, "I'm not my ancestors," you should take it as your responsibility to ask them, what the hell does that mean? If you're not your ancestors, who are you? But we understand you probably shouldn't approach them like that, because we understand that our people are confused because we have the information we're operating on has come from our enemies, and they have promoted this false narrative that we just simply accepted brutality without ever standing up and exerting our dignity. And a lot of us believe that on some level, although that's not at all true. Our history is clearly documented that we always resisted. We always stood up. We continue to stand up. And if you're a person who stands up today, where do you think you got it from? You got it from our ancestors. So we're glad that you're able to be here with us today. We thank you for being here, and we will go ahead and get started. We will just do our brief introductions as we always do and get started with the program. Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, the AAPRP. We broadcast this program every week. This is our 122nd episode. We were banned from Facebook. The message they sent as the program is just too radical. It's like Malcolm X said, whenever your enemies criticize you, that means you're doing good work. So those of you who have made adjustments and are watching us some other kind of way, we appreciate you making that effort, and they're not going to stop us. Even in these other platforms, when they begin to say the same thing, they're not going to stop us. We're going to continue getting the word out. And the APRP, our organization, is a revolutionary, independent mass political party, Pan-African political party, based in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism. Pan-Africanism, and the definition of Pan-Africanism is defined as the total liberation and unification of Africa under scientific socialism. So in short, what that means for us is we don't believe that we will ever have freedom as a people until we recognize that we are one people, no matter where we are on the planet Earth. We didn't make the decision to separate ourselves and live in all these different lands and represent all the different aspects of who we are the way we are. That was decided for us by the people who colonized us. So it makes absolutely no sense for us to live our lives based on the rules and conditions that were imposed upon us by our enemies, especially since if you're here in this backward country, you have relatives, biological relatives in Africa. That's irrefutable. You take those you pay these European corporations hundreds of dollars or whatever you pay them. I don't know, because I don't do it, but whatever you've done with that, you've paid them. And they even as backward as they are, they tell you that in the test that you have relatives in Africa. Clearly, you have relatives in the Caribbean, in South America, and Central America. You have relatives in Canada. So it makes no sense for us to acknowledge colonial borders in defining ourselves. The only thing that makes sense is us recognizing that they put us in this position by separating us and dominating us. So what makes the most logical sense is for us to reverse that process and unite around our mother Africa, and not in a capitalist sense, but in a socialist sense. So that's what we're about, you all, and our work is to achieve Pan-Africanism as outlined clearly in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare, and the strategy is there. If you want to understand that, we encourage you to check that out. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu Umi, and my daughter, Shakura Umi, who are both of us actively involved in the All African People's Revolutionary Party. So again, we thank you for joining us, this important commemoration of those who laid their lives on the line for us. And to get us started with this week's topic of commemorating Black August, I turn it over.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Father. Appreciate that. So greetings, everyone. We hope that you are in good spirits and ready for revolution. You know, it's times like this that we have to continue to stay committed to the work that we're doing. We have to stay motivated. We have to remind ourselves constantly, set an intention of why we choose to be organizers, why we're choosing to be in organizations that are working for justice. These are choices that we are actively making. And I think it's very important that we continue to analyze that and be aware that these are choices that we're making, because as long as we set the intention and as long as we continue to have a tapped in buy-in as a self-motivated ability to be a part of something larger than ourselves, that is going to help us maintain what it is we are trying to do. That's going to keep us motivated. That's going to help us continue showing up, whether it's coming to meetings or whether it is even finding ways to take breaks so that you can prevent burnout in those meetings, whatever that looks like, making sure that you're up to date with doing the readings, whatever that looks like, so that your fellow organizers can continue to rely on you and continue to see that you are dependable. That's going to be really critical. If you are not sure why you're doing something, then you should unpack that and figure out why it is you're still doing something that you don't really have a buy-in or an investment with, or you should figure out what is it that drew you to it in the first place, and is there a way you can get that back? And I say that because the enemy is working very, very hard to help you feel as insecure as you can, not just about yourself, but about where you come from, about your ancestors, and about why you would not want to organize. Because if you're organizing against the system, then you pose a threat to them, the enemy, which means that the enemy's trying really hard to make you feel like you're not doing the right thing and to make you feel like you're not making the right decisions when you actively choose to organize against. So again, I say to you, that's why you need to have an intention. For those of us that have specific projects or activities or things that we like to do, for those of us that like working out, for example, my Pilates instructors always say to me to set an intention before the class starts, because that particular class is very high intense, right? It's in a heated room, you know, it's a very warm atmosphere. We're doing high intense interval training workouts. And so, you know, you're doing mountain climbers, burpees, it's a lot going on. And if you do not set an intention before the class, it is very easy for you to get distracted, to remind yourself that you are out of breath, to maybe slow down and let your heart rate drop lower than where it needs to drop. And then before you know it, you're not actively engaging anymore. I would argue that's the same analogy for organizing. You need to set an intention to remind yourself of why you're doing what you're doing. And I would argue if you set the intention, then that's also going to help you to be able to defer the rhetoric, the BS rhetoric, I should say, that is constantly being pushed down our throats. And so, this slide here that we focused on talking about first goes in a really great context of reminding us that the system that we live in is trying really, really hard to let you know that you have not done anything to make your reality what it is, unless you go about it in a quote unquote patriotic way. As long as you love the United States as you go about your journey, then you're going to be great because you're an asset to this country. And the moment you stop doing that and you actually start to unpack the truth and the integrity behind the nonsense and the absurdity of following in this country's footsteps, then you start to pose a threat, because now you can't be trusted and now you are quote unquote being unpatriotic. This is the same reason that we have systems in place where we are constantly trying to resist, because we understand that in resisting this, that means we're not buying in to all the nonsense that has already been socialized in our environments. We're not buying into the nonsense from a rhetoric standpoint. We're not buying into the nonsense from an emotional standpoint. We're not buying into the capitalist intentions that people are posing, because their objective is to maintain the status quo and to keep capitalism protected, operated, functioning, and promoted. And as long as we continue to actively resist, organize against, and raise consciousness around that, that's a problem. That needs to be the intention that we continue to set, because we need to be reminded time and time again that what we're doing, if we set intentions, is actually the right thing to do. This is the same reason that despite our personal and emotional desire to connect with people, we know we have decided to ride with instruments of imperialism. The unquestionable truth is conscious or is it not? Is it dedicated or is it not? All representatives of the US military, police, etc., are using violence to continue to perpetuate the capitalist system, which is responsible for the level of death and destruction that is unprecedented in world history. Therefore, objectively speaking, we can never see anyone carrying out that terrorist work as someone worthy of honor. And I think it's really important to highlight this, because when we started the slide talking about setting an intention, that means that you are resisting the notion that you need to praise people who are fighting for this country, because you need to separate right here and right now that their actions of killing other people benefits you. You have to separate that. Even though that's what you've been taught, you have to separate that. You have to understand that as long as you understand that it is wrong to go around killing other people because you want to gain profit, that means that you will continue to have the active organizing mindset that you need to keep and protect so that you can continue to do this work. And you're going to have to work overtime, because the system that we live in is working overtime to make you feel insecure and to make you question yourself and doubt yourself. It's working overtime to make the organizations that we're a part of feel insecure and doubt ourselves. But we must keep going. You heard my dad say earlier, we're too radical, right? We're not staying in the status quo that we're supposed to stay in. We are out of our lane. That's what you heard him say earlier, right? So that means that not only are we doing something correct, but that means that we need to continue doing something correct even when no one else is watching. Our comrade Marilyn Buck says you should do the right thing, not because somebody else is watching you, but because it's the right thing to do. And so whether somebody's watching you or not, you are committed to your principles and you understand that if you do go to an event where they are quote unquote honoring the US military, you need to make sure that you understand not to align with those values. Because if you do align with those values and if you do honor the US military, that means you're okay with the United States killing innocent people, stealing land, raping people, stealing resources, murdering thousands of indigenous people in support of Zionism and continuing to take over occupied Palestine. That means that you're okay with African people continuing to be exploited everywhere in the world. That means you're okay with African trans women being exploited. That means you support patriarchy and you love patriarchy. You would marry patriarchy if you could by supporting the US military. Because you can't just support the US military but be against patriarchy. It doesn't work because they're all connected. They're all connected, just like the brain waves and the synapses in our brain that are connected to our central nervous system. They are all connected. All of those systems of oppression are connected, and they literally pump metaphoric oxygen into this BS system and country that we live in today. So you must take a stand against all of it. And if you are taking a stand against it, then you're going to be unpopular. And you need to just understand that that's what comes with the territory. Now, the benefits of being unpopular is that you don't have fake people in your life because now everybody understands what your standpoint is and you understand what their standpoint is, and you're continuing to live out based on your intention, based on what's important to you, based on your moral compass that you have divided out because you understand that just like the ancestors and even the comrades that are still living that we're about to acknowledge in the next slide coming up, that means that you understand, just like they did, that this is bigger than you, which means there's no such thing as individualism anymore, because you understand that the work you're doing is going to help thousands of people. I mean, how humbling is that? To know that your tiny little contribution is going to impact thousands of people during, before, and after your life. That's got to be the most humbling thing a person could even process if they truly, really think about it. We think about all of our different comrades and how they were born. And as they grew up in their life, they probably didn't continue to think about how they wanted to change humanity and make a difference. We've heard the story time and time again about how Dr. King was sitting in the back of the room and did not want to be called to the front. He was eating his food, just trying to get some nourishment. And they called him up and asked him to become that mobilizer, the face of that mobilization. But he didn't volunteer for that. He was called up to do it. We know that our comrades who were fighting off colonialism, Carlotta, for example, I'm sure that comrade woke up and said, this is messed up and I need to do something about it. And I understand that I might die in the process of doing that. And yet that comrade went forward with full throttle and kicked as much behind as they could. So I just need us to understand it has to be bigger than you. You can't just really think about it like that. And you have to think about what is it that you're willing to die for? Because in some cases that's going to happen. But the outcome of that is that Africans everywhere, indigenous people everywhere are going to remember your name, and we will honor you the correct way. Not because we're just trying to promote patrioticism and we're trying to support a country that has been based on theft of land and raping and murder. No, we're honoring you because you actually gave a darn about someone other than yourself. And you made it very clear that you cared about humanity. The troops that are fighting for this country do not care about humanity. They may have gotten sucked into it because, you know, we continue to think about how a lot of us have been driven out of confusion. And that is a fact. Some of us are trying to find ways to honor folks because we think based on what we've been taught that we need to honor them. And sometimes there's economically extorted views into their actions. Yes, that is the case. But are they worthy of honor because they shot innocent people, because they killed people, because they're bombing people in Palestine right now? No, absolutely not. We are not trying to be flip here. But think about drug dealers. Drug dealers are forced into their destructive behavior due to social conditions too, but we don't go around honoring them. we make sure to annihilate them and to highlight how horrible they are and how much they've ruined communities that we live in. So why is it okay for one situation, but it's not okay for the other, when it's literally the same level of moral argument that we're looking at? So we have to understand that if we refuse to honor anyone who follows immoral orders to kill and fight against people who are only standing up for their dignity and self-determination, that's where we have to draw the line, you all. And as I said before, if your moral compass is driving you because you have a humane intention as to why you're an organizer, then you and I both know that that's not okay. To murder someone just because they're standing up for their country and what they believe in, when you yourself are doing wrong by murdering them, that we know that we need to support that. This is why we have collaborations with the American Indian movement now. This is why we have collaborations with Palestine Liberation Organization, PLO. This is why we have collaborations with AZAPO, the Azanian organization that we have in Azania, or unfortunately colonized name of South Africa. This is why we have connections with our sibling organization, the PAIGC. This is why, because these fights are not unique to just one group of people. And the more of us that connect, the more organizations that connect, the more people that are involved in these organizations, it's going to be too much for these oppressors. They're not going to be able to keep control over all those resources and all those people. At some point, the system is going to cave, which is why you have to remain aware of the fact that we are almost there and victory is certain. That's why you set your intention, so that you can continue on that. So I want you all to just continue to think about that. Unlike so many cowardly people who pose as people committed to justice, we have no problem saying out loud and clear that you should go and get your loved ones who are unfortunately representing state institutions like imperialism. If you have family members that are police officers, if you have family members that are in the US military or the Army or the Air Force or what have you, have conversations with them and help them to understand that they're not doing anything heroic or sheroic or theroic. That's not what this is about. And unfortunately, it's been a lie that we've all been taught that that is how we define heroism, when really that's not the case. That is really not the case. As we just said, unfortunately, murdering other people, that doesn't make you a hero. And if it does, then we need to have a psychological evaluation on why we think that should equal heroism, because it shouldn't. That's not what that should equal. So we need to unpack that and challenge our family members who are doing that kind of work and helping them to understand what they're doing is not heroic, sheroic, or theroic, and what they're doing has absolutely nothing to do with any freedoms that we have obtained. They didn't fight for all of us to be free. That's another lie. We need to unpack that. We need to understand that this is a complete lie that has been shoved down our throats time and time again. And you know what? It's still being taught to students today. So that lie has not even retired. It's probably one of the oldest lies that exists just because it's been passed on. Because there's no other reason why that lie would still exist, but because it's been passed on and so forth. So, you know, we must understand that Sekou Touré said, one truth will crush 1,000 lies. That's what Sekou Touré said. So we need to start to be uncomfortable, challenge our family members at the next family barbecue, challenge our family members at the next baby shower, challenge our family members even at the next funeral if you feel the space is adequate and decent. Challenge these things. Challenge these things time and time again. And really, as I said before, even when no one else is watching, how committed are you to your own principles? Because everybody knows when you go to a sporting event and you're with other people, you don't want to be unpopular, so you stand during the national anthem. But what about when you're going to a baseball game because you just got a discount one day and you just decided to go when no one else is there that you know? Are you still going to stand, or are you actually going to stay seated because you don't believe in singing the national anthem? Because if you did, then that would indicate that you support this United States that continues to murder and rape and kill innocent people. Not to mention people who are literally just fighting to keep what they have because the US has already tried to take it 1,000,000 times over. So we got to think more about that, you all. The honor we offer is reserved for those people who are courageously standing up against this capitalist system, demanding justice for all humanity. And I want to continue to stress as we transition to the next slide that these folks understood that they had huge sacrifices that they needed to make. Thank you. They had huge sacrifices that they needed to make, and they still chose to do that. There are so many of us that once we understand that we might actually lose our life doing this work, we're so quick to step back and reevaluate it. So the people are not worth you losing your life, but the people sacrifice their lives for you. It should go both ways as far as I'm concerned. It's literally a dependent on one another. The only reason I'm sitting here talking to you in my apartment right now is because thousands of people died running and trying to escape someone trying to kill them, so that my ancestors could connect, and eventually the ancestral line would draw to my mom and dad being able to produce me. That is literally the only reason. If all of them had died before, then I wouldn't be the exact same person that I am today. All of that was by design, and all of that was strategic. And so by the same token, in my opinion, that means that I need to understand that I could die doing this work, but I would much rather die and know that I tried so hard to make a difference for my ancestors and for the people who are even yet to be born. I would want to know that I died knowing that I was trying to be as close to impressive under Assata Shakur's eyes as possible, or trying to be as close to impressive under the eyes of Theodora Gomes as much as possible. As much as those comrades have done for me, it would be an honor for them to even know my name. Are you serious right now? So we have to continue to think about, like, this is not a choice where you get to just decide what's best for you. This is what's best for humanity. That's what it's always been about. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then you need to get out of our way so that we can still do this work and you can still benefit from it later, even though you didn't contribute. You need to think about that. And we have to think more about, do we wish to know who are our real troops? Who should we really be celebrating? The glorious freedom fighters of the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau, like Sister Theodora Gomes, who participated with the armed struggle against the Portuguese to free Guinea-Bissau from colonialism. This historic sister just participated in our International African Liberation Day program 2 months ago, and I was honored beyond privilege to give this comrade an award that they received at our African Liberation Day event. And it was so humbling. This comrade was able to come onto the video, and they actually printed out the award and handed it to the comrade as I had just said their name. And I'm telling you all, like, to know that I was able to even learn about this person and the work they did to resist the Portuguese from colonizing Guinea-Bissau, like, words can't express. They can't express. Like, I feel like even though the comrade was literally taking the award, I feel like Theodora Gomes was actually passing me the baton. That's what I felt like in that moment. And I felt like we had a connection. I may have made it up in my head, but I truly felt like we had a connection. Like, I was really geeking out. Like, oh my God, this is Theodora Gomes. Like, because that's who that is. That's who we celebrate. That's who we do standing ovations for over and over and over and over again. And if the master cuts off my knees, then I stand on my knees and do a standing ovation for Theodora. But it's because of Theodora that we're able to sit here and even talk about the fact that the Portuguese had to figure out another way to take over Guinea-Bissau, because she worked relentlessly to let them know, you're not coming in here and you're not doing that. You need to try again and turn around and go back, or we will kill you. How much bravery is that? How much bravery is it to know that Comrade Fernando Florent, who courageously went undercover in Miami in order to gain information on the US terrorist attacks for socialist Cuba? I still think about this comrade to this day. You all know that in order to go undercover, this comrade couldn't even tell their family what they were doing, because obviously their family would be in danger if they truly knew the truth, because, you know, the imperialist oppressors were kidnapping their family members and questioning them and asking them, why is Fernando doing this and doing that? And they couldn't have had any information. They would have got it out of them. So even his partner was like, you've turned on socialist Cuba? Like, what's up with that? And he's like, no, it's not this. And then, no, you tripping. Like, what is that? Like, this person went undercover. You all are not hearing me. This person woke up one day and said, I need to fight for Cuba in a way I have never fought before. So I'm going to go undercover, and I might lose my life in the process. My wife might leave me because she thought that I sold out. And this person still went forward and did that, because socialist Cuba meant that much in terms of being protected. That is a true troop for you. That is who we do a standing ovation for, over and over and over again. And we say their names as many times as the saliva and tongue in our mouths will allow us to say their names. Because without them, we would be nothing without them. If anything happened to Cuba, it would affect the whole world. So we have to continue to honor that and continue to acknowledge that. For their efforts, Fernando spent 16 unjust years in a US prison. The unselfish 500,000 Cuban troops who sacrificed everything to fight against racist mercenaries in Southern Africa. We also praise and honor the courageous soldiers of the Pan-African Congress of Azania, also, as we know, the colonized name South Africa. So we honor the Pan-African Congress of Azania, our family in the Democratic Party of Guinea, who bravely challenged the French colonialism and then, continued to serve as a base against international imperialism. These are all examples, you all, of reasons why we should be taking time off and having holidays in honor of the Democratic Party of Guinea. That's a reason to have a holiday. That's a reason to take off work and to celebrate. That's a reason to acknowledge all this work that these folks have done, challenging the French and the Portuguese to not have colonization access to your continent of Mother Africa, if you identify as African. We also think about our elders and ancestors in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. Of course, we have to think about our ancestors from the Black Panther Party. We think about our ancestors from the Black Liberation Army, the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Land and Freedom Movement, Mau Mau in Kenya. These organizations and many, many, many others stood up, and they continue to stand up today against imperialism. Every right that we have, every opportunity that we possess, we owe 100% of this to our courageous people who sacrificed everything for the name of justice. Everything they sacrificed for us. They didn't even know us. They didn't even know our names. They don't even know where we live, and they did it. Because as I said before, they set an intention for humanity. You all are not listening. They set an intention for humanity, which means that they wanted the world to be a better place for all living creatures, no matter if you were a human or a plant or an ant or a dog. They didn't care. They wanted things to be better. They deserve the honor and respect so many of us have mistakenly directed towards forces of injustice, but we can redirect that. It is not too late. And if many of us understand that, then we would like to humbly add the following to our distinguished list of honorable soldiers: the Palestinian Liberation Organization and the Palestinian Resistance Organizations, the Irish Republican Socialist Party, absolutely, the International Coalition of Human Rights in the Philippines, absolutely, the American Indian Movement, Red Nation, and other indigenous organizations fighting for land reclamation and the return of indigenous territories to the indigenous nations. You know, it helps when you research where you are and what that indigenous name is, because that's part of resisting colonialization, is reminding folks that this is indigenous land. So if you do identify in an area that has been deemed as indigenous land, try to figure out what the actual name is. Because I can tell you right now, it's Cherokee land. It's not Memphis, Tennessee, okay? I can tell you right now. So do the research and understand where you are. Give knowledge to the indigenous people and find a way to join an organization working for justice. All of these forces fight against injustice, and that qualifies these folks to be our troops. Each and every day, this will be true, despite the propaganda that's thrown. And the propaganda will tell you that these are the enemies. But you have to be smart enough to do your research, you all. You have to do what? Increase your political education. The propaganda is thrown at you 24/7, 365, and it will try to convince us that we need to buy into imperialism's plan to justify their terrorist attacks everywhere on the planet Earth. But if we join organizations that are working for justice and we set intentions and we make sure that we know why we are organizing, no one can take that from us. It's almost like being in a position where you understand that you have a special skill. As long as you practice that skill, no one will ever make you unlearn that skill, because you will always have that. So if you know how to organize, if you know how to ride a bike, if you know how to properly do workout techniques, like whatever your skill is, harness that skill, practice it, keep it going, and find a way to use that skill to advance humanity, because we owe it to them and they owe it to us. And in some cases, it's already been given. We've already benefited from that sacrifice that others have done. Join an organization working for justice, and let's celebrate our real troops. This point on, no more celebrating folks that have killed other people unnecessarily. Ashe.
Ashe, Madasi, Shakura, and we are just going to continue forward with talking about Black August and just giving you some brief history of what Black August means. So essentially the day, or the concept of Black August, not the day, the concept of Black August is an annual commemoration, and it's largely centered around the martyrdom of George Jackson at San Quentin Prison on August 31st, 1971. And if you don't know that history, George Jackson was incarcerated in the California penal system when he was 17 years old. And he was in that system for the remaining 12 years of his life throughout the 1960s until he was murdered by the state in 1971. And along the way, he began to be mentored when he was at Soledad Prison by an African by the name of W.L. Nolan. And W.L. Nolan introduced George to the concept of this country being an empire and being against the interests of the masses of African people. He introduced George to the concept of study and discipline. And from that, George began to grow. And when W.L. Nolan was murdered in the institution, there was a guard that was subsequently murdered, thrown off of one of the tiers. And George Jackson and a number of other people who were incarcerated there were accused of committing that death of that guard. And from that, George Jackson was marked as, somewhat of a leader of this movement within these institutions of incarceration, of resistance for the people who were incarcerated. And on August 31st, 1971, he was assassinated by San Quentin prison guards. They said he was trying to climb a 20-foot wall and escape from the prison, a 20-foot barbed wire wall. Now, George Jackson was an outstanding person with extreme discipline. He did 1,000 push-ups per day, but I don't think he could have mounted a 20-foot barbed wire wall. And they said he had a pistol, all the stuff. You have to go into the history. But that's essentially where the concept of Black August came from, is what happened to George and what happened to his younger brother, Jonathan, a year before in Marin County in the Bay Area, when there was an effort to try to free political prisoners in the Marin County courthouse in August of 1970. And there was a shootout in which Jonathan Jackson and William Christmas, and as well as the judge in the courtroom and some of the other people, were killed in that shootout. And there were a number of the jurors and other people who were injured. And so these events came to be known as Black August, and they evolved to being more than just commemorations of what happened to these brave individuals, but also representations of the movement to fight against this U.S. capitalist empire. And the movement, when it evolved, it began to symbolize respect and support for really all incarcerated persons who have dared to stand up and fight against capitalist oppression against African people and the rest of humanity. And even if you have not been familiar with the concept of Black August, and we only have a few minutes, so we cannot totally educate you on it in these few minutes, but even the fact that you know the name Angela Davis is because of these events that we're describing to you right now. Because Angela Davis came to prominence when she was a professor in the California university system, and she was conscious of the social injustices happening. And she visited George Jackson and became friends with Jonathan Jackson, and was accused of helping involved in the process of getting this gun that George Jackson supposedly had. And that's the reason why Angela Davis was unable to, they couldn't capture her for a short period of time. And then when they did capture her, her case became, international news. It was all related to the events that I'm describing to you here. And so just to, give you some analysis of some of these folks that we're talking about, when we say we don't honor the U.S. military, we see the U.S. military as a mercenary outfit. We see the Israeli Defense Forces as mercenary outfits. We see the British military, French military, Canadian military, all of these capitalist Zionist militaries as forces that are designed to oppress the masses of humanity. They have no example you can point us to that indicates where they've done any work to bring freedom and liberation to anybody. Even all of this time that they've spent in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can't claim people from either of those countries that say, oh, the U.S. military liberated us. You can't point to any examples of anything they've done that has made the world a safer and a better place, because that's not why they do what they do, as Shakur pointed to. But these faces you see on the screen in front of you are faces of people who risked their lives and oftentimes gave up their lives. When we look at the example of Jonathan Jackson and George Jackson, and these folks on the screen now who've spent decades in prison because of their work in organizations like the Black Panther Party, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, the Black Liberation Army. And many of these wonderful people their lives were lost while they were incarcerated. You look in the upper center picture, the African on the right, Russell Maroon Schultz, we just lost him 8 months ago while he was still incarcerated after being incarcerated 40-something years. Mumia Abu Jamal on his left is still incarcerated and in very poor health. And Mutulu Shakur under Mumia, still incarcerated in very poor health. These are Black African liberation soldiers that are incarcerated. Sundiata Akoli in the upper right-hand corner was finally released after almost 45 years in prison just recently, but he's in his mid to late 80s and in poor health. Jamil Abdullah Alameen, formerly H. Rap Brown, there on the bottom in the center, still incarcerated. Ruchelle McGee is really the longest known incarcerated prisoner, almost going on 60 years, 60 years incarcerated. And this is all because of their work in the African liberation movement. So we honor these people. These are the people that we have a Veterans Day for. We don't give no Veterans Day for no mercenary terrorists who wreak havoc on the masses of people on the earth for multinational corporations. You have to be out of your mind to sit there and think that these people I don't care if it's your father, your mother, your grandmama. I don't give a damn who it is. You have to be out of your mind if you want to suggest that people need to honor these people. We get it. We understand they couldn't get hired anywhere else, so they went to the military. But that doesn't mean that we have to forget that the real people that should be acknowledged are the people that said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm going to jail. I'm going to another part of the world. I'm doing something. I'm not going to fight for these imperial. Those are the real people that should be honored. The people that refused to follow orders. Anybody can follow orders. A roach could follow an order. It takes a person of conviction and dignity to say, I'm not doing something that's wrong. So we honor these people who went up against empire to stand on the side of justice. They didn't get follow orders from a system of injustice so that they can just get a damn home loan and college tuition. I mean, I would be ashamed to even tell anybody that that's what I was doing, if that's what I was doing. Not to mention no honor. There's no honor in that. Some of us are not going to be confused by that nonsense. So again, we talk about Black August today is a time that's seen to recognize these incarcerated freedom fighters and to generate support for them and their families. So people like Mumia Abu Jamal, people like Jamil Abdullah Alameen, Ruchelle McGee, you should be, Mutulu Shakur and others, you should be engaged in work, especially if you're not in any organization. The least you can do is write them, communicate with them, participate in organizations that are raising resources for their families to take care of their families. You should be doing something to help them and their families. Since you're not doing anything else, you should do that. So that's one thing that can happen. Geronimo Gijaga, formerly Pratt, who was a long time incarcerated political prisoner in this country for 27 years. He made a statement that all people in prison are political prisoners because the system is unjust. So if someone in the ghetto commits a crime, if they were living a different life, they wouldn't need to commit that crime. So that's a political question. That was his point. And he was absolutely correct when he said that. So really, everybody in prison, even if they murdered a bunch of people, that's still a political condition that created those conditions, because we have with us today the technology, the medical resources, all of that to treat people and to give people what they need so they don't have to feel alienated and don't have to go out and commit a lot of the crimes that are being committed today. We have the capacity to address that. That's not a problem with capacity. The problem is there's no political will to do it. So these are political questions. So that's why we say that these are political prisoners, each and every one of them that's incarcerated today. And until you have a system in place that is able to meet people's needs, and what I mean by that is provide them the opportunity to meet their full potential, not do anything for them, not give them anything, but eliminate any obstacles that prevent them, if they have the will and determination, to rise up and reach their full potential. Until we have a system like that, then we can't be talking about really incarcerating people. We certainly can't be talking about executing them. And that type of system will never exist within a capitalist system, because this system thrives on blaming the people on the bottom and making them pay a price, and the people on top never have to pay. You know, this is amazing how we're conditioned to do this. You know, think about it for a minute. Everybody, and I'm not defending Joe Biden or Trump or Obama. To me, they're all the same. They're all a bunch of terrorists. I'm not for any of them. But I'm saying it's interesting how people blame Biden for the high gas prices. And you don't ever hear anybody blaming Shell or Chevron or British Petroleum. You never hear that. You never hear anybody saying, you know, Shell is a criminal for charging these high prices. They don't have to charge. If the oil companies charge $2 US dollars a gallon for gas right now, they would still make record profits. So they don't have to charge $5-6 US dollars a gallon, $7 US dollars a gallon. They've been charging those prices around the world for years. You don't know that, but they have. They don't have to charge that kind of money for a gallon of gas. They do that because they're pimps, and pimps manipulate political conditions to profit off of them. And that's what these people are. But because we're so conditioned to support capitalism by any means necessary, you don't even hear anybody raise that as a question. They blame everything else except the actual culprit. And that's because of how we've been conditioned. That's why these are all political questions, you all. That's the reason why that is. And they are also, because we recognize everybody incarcerated is really a political prisoner, because of this system is an empire, it's a backward system, then there are actions that have evolved out of this concept of Black August that take place every year that are designed to bring attention to the mass incarceration system around the world, and how the capitalist system incarcerates people because it's profitable for it to do so, and because it's a way for it to control populations that resist against its oppression and its empire. So Black August has evolved into a movement designed to bring those questions into human consciousness. And these are things that we all need to support and be a part of. These are very good things that are happening. And so, you know, there you have a listing of some organizations that are involved in supporting political prisoners, like the Jericho movement is one of them. You should know about that organization. You should participate and support their work. I mentioned some of the things they do for the families of political prisoners and to support political prisoners. They do that. If you don't like them, that's no excuse. We don't even want to hear why you don't like them. It's irrelevant. Nobody cares. Start your own organizations to support political prisoners, like the people I mentioned, Leonard Peltier and all of these folks. Start your own organization to support political prisoners in occupied Palestine. Start your own organization to support Irish political prisoners. Start your own organization to support other indigenous and African political prisoners. You don't have an excuse. You got to do that. And then also join an organization. You know, again, That's what we have to do, because we know that there are many efforts in play. There's letter writing to family and support to support these folks. There's a lot of things. But the only reason why Facebook can say our program, Our Ancestors' Voices, is too radical and that we can no longer broadcast there is because we're disorganized. That's the only reason why they can get away with that, because they know they can say that. And what have you done about that? When it's not just our program, they do that to a lot of work that's happening. What have you done? You haven't done anything. They went to the African People's Socialist Party this weekend, and they ransacked their offices, the FBI. They said they were working agents of Russia. And this is another African liberation organization similar to our party here that does work to try to liberate our people. You can have criticisms of them. I certainly do, but they do work to organize our people. And I know that they're not agents of Russia. I mean, even a fool would know that. What are you doing in response to that? You know, that's why we say join an organization, because these things happen. They ban us from Facebook. Now, you participate in this you know, we're not talking about anything here that's wrong, that's offensive, that's exploiting anybody or demeaning anybody that doesn't deserve to be demeaned. But yet they can say that we're too radical, and you have no organized response against that. So that's why we keep saying the same thing. We've got to get in organizations, because that's the only way we can develop capacity so that we can stop these kind of things from happening. And also, the best way to carry on the work of these folks, I can't do anything about the fact that Mutulu Shakur has been in prison 40 plus years. Mumia has been there that long. Jamil Abdul Alameen is approaching a couple of decades of being in prison, or over 2 decades of being in prison. I can't do anything for that time that these wonderful comrades have lost, but I certainly can dedicate my life to continuing the work that got them there. Because if we build up enough capacity so that there are enough of us, then they can't put us, like Dr. King said, they can't put us all in prison. The only reason why they're able to effectively do that now is because most of us are not engaged in this struggle. So they can knock off individuals, and by doing that, they can begin to impact the movement. But if more of us were engaged, they would never be able to do that. So the best way you can honor these comrades is to get involved in the movement. When I used to visit Marilyn Buck when she was living all the time, Shakur used to go with me. I used to ask her all the time. I was a lot younger and, you know, somewhat in awe of her and her sacrifice. And I would visit her all the time, and I would ask her every time, what can I do for you? And she always answered the same way. She said, you're doing it. By the work that you're doing it. You're doing it. That's why I'm here. This woman was in prison 33 years. They let her out because she had cancer. She lived 2 weeks after that and made her physical transition. And she sat there and told me that, like, you're doing what you need to do. You don't need to do anything else other than what you're doing. So that's what needs to happen, you all. That's it. You got to be a part of this solution. Because Kwame Ture was correct when he used to always say, our movement is so weak that we leave our soldiers on the battlefield. He was talking about the people like Marilyn, like David Gilbert, like Leonard Peltier, like Mutulu Shakur, like Jamil Abdullah Alameen, like Rochelle McGee. He was talking about these folks that we don't even have capacity to free them. Yeah, you know, we had comrades organized to bust Asada Shakur out of prison, and she's safely in Cuba. And we're going to do a program on what's happening with her in a couple of weeks, because imperialism is constantly trying to misinform you about that. And a lot of people repeating imperialist lies and don't even know it. But that's one person. We need to develop the capacity to do that for all of our people who are unjustly incarcerated. We need to be able to do that. And the people who paid that price for Sister Asada, you don't even know who they are. You don't even know who they are. You don't even know who they were. Many of them that aren't even here now, there's no harm that could come to them. Ones that aren't here now, there's no harm that could come to them. So there's no reason why you could still don't lie and say, well, we don't need to know who they are because they could have consequences. Yeah, I can understand that for the people that are alive, but many of them are not. because I know who they are. And you don't even want to know who they are. That's just an excuse. Because if you don't know who they are, you're not accountable to them. So we have to get better, you all. And the first step is we have to get engaged. That's our responsibility to do that. We have got to get engaged. So if you're not in an organization and you want to know what the main problem is today, pick a mirror up and put it in front of your face. That is the main problem, is that you are not engaged. If you're somebody that's saying, well, if you're going to people who are in organizations who are doing work and you're telling them, let me know when I can help, you are part of the problem. They can't let you know. They got too much work on their plate. They need you to say, hey, I'm ready to do some work. If you can help me, direct me, I appreciate that. But I'm going to get out here and put my skin in the game and take some risks and get my skin bruised up like yours is. That's what you need to be. If you're not doing that, you're not helping solve these problems. All you're doing is trying to do something to make yourself feel better about doing nothing except consuming and making no contribution to this struggle that we're engaged in. And we got too many people like that. And then when it comes time to have an opinion, you want to sit there and bloviate and pontificate about what nobody gives a damn what you think. You're not doing anything. Nobody wants to listen to you. And if that's your ego that thinks anybody wants to listen to you or that you have the right to be listened to. Why should anybody listen to you? What have you done? Except turn your TV on. Whether you're too lazy to even get up and turn it, you got to use the remote to do that. And think somebody needs to listen to your, nobody wants to hear what you have to say until you have skin in the game. I don't have any problem getting people to listen to me. I don't even want to talk sometimes. I got to talk so often. So if you want that, pay the price so that you can get that. We would love to share that with you. We're overwhelmed. I don't know how many times we got to say that. So get engaged. Please get engaged. We need you to do that. We thank you all for coming. We ask you to join us next week, August 7th. We're going to do a program. August is the born month of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. He's maligned so much by imperialism. I see it all the time. People just vomit out imperialist talking points about people who gave more for our people in their pinky nail than a lot of us give in our whole worthless lives. And Marcus Mosiah Garvey was one of those people. So we're going to talk about his unknown contributions next week. So we ask you to join us for that. And we ask you to go to our APRP Forward Ever shop. Stop bragging about how you bought a sweatshirt. Buy another one. Buy 10 more. Keep buying it. You keep going to the supermarket. You don't say, well, I went to the supermarket 10 years ago. So that's it. You keep giving them your money. You keep going to Shell. You're putting gas in your car. So you may as well keep contributing to revolutionary organizations. Buy a sweatshirt every week. Buy one every month. Do that. Make that contribution. At least we can do that, right? Go to aprp-intl.org. Join the All African People's Revolutionary Party. If you don't want to join us, join some organization working for justice. If you don't want to do that, start your own. Start I Can Do Better Than Any of Them organization and organize for liberation. Go to abetterworld.me. We've got all of these videos housed there, 122 of them. You can get each and every one of them. You can forward them to people you want to watch them. We certainly hope you do that. You know, we're not on Facebook. We need your help. We got people who do that. Mark, we appreciate you. Comrade Mark is always getting people to come and support these programs. And that's what we need everybody to do. You sitting there and then you look at the whole program all the time. And then 5 minutes after it's over, you get high and eat a hot dog and fall asleep. And then 5 minutes after that, you forgot every goddamn thing. And so what good is you doing us if that's how you do it all the time? We need you to help us spread this word. Please do that. Go to Hood Communists. There's articles every Thursday. We are struggling with capacity. We need your help. We don't kill the few people who are trying. Help us. So go to Hood Communists. We got all our proud programs on the bottom there. We need you to support them. Please, they're doing the same thing we're trying to do here. So please support that. Pan-African Women's Day. We have programs coming up. The flyer on the left speaks to the program on August 6th Next week, it's a virtual program, international, sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party and some of our sibling parties at home in Africa. Shakur is working on that program. You can get more information if you go to the aprp-intl.org site. So please do that. Please participate. And then we have programs of local programs. We have 2 Pan-African Women's Day programs here in California, and I'm participating in both of them. There's one next Sunday in Oakland. I'm going to drive down there, participate, and then be back for this program on Marcus Garvey because we are dedicated to the work that we do. And then the following week, I'm driving down to Los Angeles for the Pan-African Women's Day program. Our party is hosting there because we are dedicated to the work that we do. We need your help. We need you to put some skin in this game, you all. That's what you got to do. And if you want to continue to talk, you got to be willing to match your walk with your talk. We appreciate you. Think about that. Make a contribution. Forward ever, backwards never. We are winning. Don't listen to these bourgeois lies. We are winning this fight. And if you don't see it, it's because you're not properly involved in it. Stay strong. Enjoy the rest of your Sunday evening.